What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Russian President Vladimir Putin recently had a meeting with Russia's Security Council where he proposed revising the nation's approach to the use of its nuclear arsenal and updating its nuclear doctrine. Whenever reading the updated proposal for the very first time, you'll think that Russia empowers itself to use the nukes almost whenever they want. A missile, a drone, or even a single bullet crosses the border? Prepare for nukes. Foot of a non-Russian soldier steps on a Russian land? Prepare the nukes. Any ally of Russia gets attacked? Get them nukes ready, boys. We are going to war. But is it really that serious and straight to the point? Or is it just a clever use of bureaucratic language to make these threats look real? While in reality, something else bigger has to happen before Putin presses his favorite button that he has such complicated romantic relationship with. Today, let's explore the nuances of this proposal, the underlying dynamics of Russia's political system, the implications of persistent nuclear threats, and the realities of Russia's nuclear doctrine. And by the end, it will be clear whether this is yet another empty nuclear threat or an actual attempt to escalate. To understand whether we take seriously the change in Russia's nuclear doctrine, it is first important to have a basic understanding of a Russian political system. And don't worry, I think it won't take more than 2-3 minutes, and it's not that complicated after all. Everything in Russia revolves around one single man, so yeah. So Russia's political system exhibits a complex duality. On one hand, there is a palpable hatred for bureaucratic processes, laws and regulations. This mostly comes from the regular people. Quite understandable, as not too many people in the rest of the world like to jump through bureaucratic hoops and red tape. This aversion manifests in a culture where legal frameworks are often seen as obstacles rather than foundations. For example, if you want to start a business, the biggest roadblock will be not which type of business you want to create and where you will find new clients, but instead how to register your business, how to pay taxes, how to follow all the endlessly changing rules and regulations, and so on. In the end, we get a potential entrepreneur who spends most of his or her day thinking about how to do everything properly, so the government leaves you alone. At the same time, laws and regulations are frequently perceived as applicable only to those lacking influence or resolve. In other words, if you are a law-abiding citizen, you must be some kind of a lower or middle-class person who can be taken advantage of whenever needed. And those of a higher net worth are shady people, people with connections, or just plain scammers. This mentality has fostered in an environment where lawlessness is not just tolerated, but has become a cornerstone of the current political regime. It also applies to Russian-Ukrainian war-related topics. Actions such as allowing non-government individuals to recruit inmates without official authorization and send them fighting in Ukraine, not following orders of the Ministry of Defense at the same time, highlights a blatant disregard for established legal procedures. Just imagine this in your own country. For example, you go into your local jail, ask to give you a 1-hour meeting with all the prisoners, and present them an opportunity of a lifetime to redeem themselves if they go fight in Afghanistan, for example. Who are you to give them pardon? Who are you to recruit people for war? How all of this is even possible? Well, as you can see, you can do it in Russia. The manipulation of constitutional processes illustrates how legal norms can be adjusted to serve specific agendas. This open disrespect for the rule of law is characteristic of a personal dictatorship, where the leader can establish or ignore rules at will, or let his closest people do exactly the same. And while most Russians hate the red tape, on the other hand, a paradoxical reverence for paperwork and official documentation exists within the bureaucratic machinery of the state. In this case, formal decrees and legislative changes are treated with near sacred importance. A piece of paper with a stamp on it and signatures of important people is seen almost as the next sacred commandment. Now imagine if this is a signature of Putin on such paper. Nobody would ever dare to think about, nobody would ever dare to think about questioning such laws or orders. If Putin wants something, it's not about a matter of how and if it can be achieved, it's about when it can be brought to life. The act of turning policies into law is seen as a means of solidifying authority and ensuring compliance. This creates a reality where laws are simultaneously unimportant and of greatest importance and urgency, depending on how they serve the interests of those in power. After more than 2.5 years into ongoing conflict, President Putin's frequent issuance of threats and warnings, particularly regarding nuclear capabilities, has begun to lose its intended effect. We already talked about it in more details in our previous videos, so just a brief refresher in case you missed it. Ukraine, its Western allies, and the international community have grown increasingly indifferent to these threats. The rhetoric surrounding red lines, brown lines, and nuclear options has become a subject of satire, even among pro-war commentators and Z-patriots within Russia. Despite Russia's blackmail, Ukraine has continued to receive substantial military support from Western nations, including heavy equipment, HIMARS, ATACMS, battle tanks, armored vehicles, fighter jets, and much more. Russian territories have experienced attacks, diversions, raids, and parts of Russian land have been occupied for over a month. Each of these actions, according to earlier statements by Putin and former President Dmitry Medvedev, should have triggered severe response, potentially even a nuclear strike. However, such escalations have not materialized, leading to skepticism about the credibility of these threats. The overuse of nuclear rhetoric has diminished its impact. By resorting to the unprecedented attack prematurely and repeatedly, the Russian leadership has shown a position of weakness rather than strength. After all, Putin thought that this war will be over in just a couple of weeks, will take Kiev in 3 days, not a big deal. So that's why he was spitting nuclear threats left and right with such ease. Then, the actions of Ukrainians started to become more and more severe, so that's why Putin had to continue his threats. Something like, it's okay, you got back Kherson region, which is ours according to amended constitution. But if you attack our actual territory, then we will not think twice and launch the nukes in order to protect the sovereignty of our country. Well, as you can see, even here nothing happened. This over-reliance on nuclear weapons has left little room for further escalation and has exposed a strategic miscalculation in Putin's approach to war. Reviewing Russia's nuclear doctrine is essential to understand these new developments. Officially titled Foundations of State Policy in the Area of Nuclear Deterrence, this presidential decree outlines the conditions under which Russia might consider the use of nuclear weapons. However, it is crucial to recognize that this document is not a federal law or constitutional provision. It serves as a statement of intent rather than a binding legal framework. Basically, if you provoke us, we'll think so hard about responding back with the doomsday device. No promises it will happen, but we will try our best to look scary. And yes, this is also not a binding legal framework either, so there is also no certain if-then scenario written. The final decision is always up to the most important people within the Russian government, obviously including Putin himself. The decree specifies scenarios such as a response to an enemy attack on critical government or military infrastructure that could lead to a nuclear response, or a conventional attack that threatens the very existence of the Russian state. But these conditions are broadly defined and open to interpretation. For example, Ukraine has concluded strikes on Russian radar installations that are part of Russia's strategic defense, but are not directly involved in the current conflict. Despite fitting the criteria outlined in the doctrine, these actions did not provoke a nuclear response. Or what about the threat to Russia's integrity and sovereignty? Kursk incursion most certainly qualifies under these circumstances for Putin to use nukes, yet he didn't. How far deep can Ukrainians go in order for Putin to consider, alright, that's deep enough, please stop it? This ambiguity suggests that the decision to employ nuclear weapons ultimately rests solely with the Russian president. The decree serves more as a guideline for potential justification rather than a definitive trigger for action. It emphasizes the personalized nature of authority within Russia's political structure, where critical decisions are centralized and not necessarily constrained by documented policies. And Putin might have miscalculated significantly the invasion into Ukraine, but he's not a total bloke. He knows that if he uses nukes, he won't be the only one, he will not be the last one. This will trigger the chain reaction of other nuclear states doing exactly that. America strikes Moscow, North Korea strikes Washington in response, and so on. And there is simply no way Putin will risk his life for Ukraine. President Putin's proposal to revise the Nuclear Deterrence Doctrine signifies an attempt to reinforce Russia's strategic appearance through formal means, by adjusting conditions that include the detection of a massive launch of air and space attack weapons crossing into Russian territory. The leadership aims to elevate the seriousness of their stance. This is just a bureaucratic attempt to escalate the situation a little bit further, because there is not much more serious threat than nukes themselves. There is no way to escalate further if you already threatened using them. The only way you can heat the situation just a little bit more is by reducing the requirements that will lead to the use of these very weapons. And that's exactly what Putin did. But this move raises questions about its practical impact. The previous doctrine already included broad conditions that could justify nuclear retaliation, yet did not compel action when such scenarios happened. The act of amending the decree may be more about projecting strength and attempting to restore the diminishing deterrent effect of nuclear threats than about changing the actual policy. And the reliance on official documentation to convey threats highlights the peculiar relationship between autocratic power and bureaucratic processes in Russia. While the leadership conveniently disregards some laws, they also seek to legitimize their actions through formal decrees. This contradiction reflects a belief that enshrining intentions in official documents will command greater respect and compliance, both domestically and internationally. And to answer the original question of this video, will Putin now finally use nukes, since the requirements to do so are as low as never before? Well, personally, I think it is highly unlikely. This is just yet another failed blackmail attempt, and this time Putin wanted to scare the world not with the nukes themselves, but rather with a simple piece of paper. Well, there you have it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's episode and if you want to see more videos like this, please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you wish to support my work. There are links down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
To sway, we do not believe.